Today, we are talking about identity. What is it, and why has it created such a big controversy, not only among Americans, but amongst the whole world? Hi, and welcome back to Blunt Script, where our goal is to share with you uncensored truth about challenging relationship and life questions. I'm your host, Queen Saint-Just, and this is my wonderful husband, Ezra Saint-Just. And before we go on, please click that like button to help out our algorithm and subscribe or follow for more wholesome content like this. All right, so before we do go on, I just want us to start a little bit off with a few questions here, some icebreaker questions. So we're gonna play a game called This or That, where you'll just have to answer whether you agree with this or that. All clear?
Okay.
All right, so Ezra, long distance love or local commitment?
Local commitments.
Okay, what if I wasn't a local commitment though?
Well, you became a local commitment because
We made it local.
Yeah.
Okay, all
I
right.
told you I can't do long distance. So then it was a month afterwards we decided to unite.
Okay. All right. Yes, we decided to live in the same place. Jealousy as a sign of love or unhealthy insecurity?
So you say jealousy as a sign of love?
Yes. Like, do you perceive jealousy as a sign of love or as an unhealthy insecurity?
Which one do I prefer? Which one do I see as a sign of love?
What do you see it as?
Oh, what do I see jealousy? Okay. So if I see jealousy as a sign of love, it's a sign of insecurity.
Okay. Do you ever get jealous?
If I ever get jealous?
Yes.
I'm sure we're human, right? We might get jealous for many things.
Okay. All right. So you see it as a sign of insecurity?
It all depends, it depends if you, what the jealousy is about, but it could be both sometimes. Someone could be jealous, but because they love someone, but then there is a jealousy that could be very insecure as well. It depends on how extreme something goes.
Okay.
I think there are borders to it. You can go overboard, and then it's just insecurity. But if you are jealous in a way where you can be protective, because you just want to make sure like no one maybe impacts your spouse or someone in a way that may bring hurt to them, and you're jealous over that person, and so much so you want to safeguard them, then it could be just the love aspect. So I think there's a line between love and how insecure you are.
Okay. All right. Open communication about the past relationships. Open communication about past relationships, or keep it hidden?
Personally, I think knowledge is something that I prefer. I prefer to be knowledgeable about something than ignorant. So, of course, there are certain details of maybe certain aspect that, okay, whatever. But if something is maybe if something is like a big aspect that probably needs to be shared, then I'd rather it be shared. But then, of course, if something is not, all the little details of something that's not really relevant, that's fine. It doesn't have to be shared. But anything major, I think, if if you had past marriages, I want to know like why, like what happened, like what brought about the divorce, like how's your experience, like I don't want to just be blind entering into something and then I don't really know that person.
Yeah, I don't think anybody should be blind going into any relationship. If it's something that would affect your future spouse or even boyfriend, girlfriend, I think it should be shared as well. All right, online privacy. Share passwords or keep it private?
With who?
Your significant other.
Oh, okay. So if to share password, it could be private. Well, I have nothing private about my life when it comes to my spouse. So sharing a password is perfectly fine. I think you probably you have access to all
we
my
use the same passwords.
Yeah.
All right.
And we have a password security shared tool, so you basically have access to all my accounts.
Yes, we do. But I mean, like for others, I think also like.
Oh, you mean you're asking pertaining to us or in general?
In general, because obviously we know the answers to these. Yes, your perspective on it.
It's my opinion, what I prefer.
Because I think also like, like if you're someone who always wants to keep stuff private, it's either you have something to hide, or unless the other person is just too, you know how there's some people who are too much of a Sherlock Holmes in a relationship where you just scrutinize everything and you're just like, okay, I need a breather from that. Yeah. Okay. Next question. Ex-partner friendship, encourage or discourage?
Ex-partner friendship, like, I don't think a spouse has a business maintaining a close friendship with an ex-partner. I think, I think there is definitely a boundary that needs to be in place. Not that you don't communicate with someone or,
Yeah.
may not have interactions. But if you're going out with an ex-partner, or if you're on the phone every day with an ex-partner, that's very concerning. So
That's suspicious.
I will definitely personally discourage that.
All right. Now, here's one that might affect us.
Yeah.
We've talked about it, but parenting styles.
Okay.
Strict discipline or free-spirited approach?
Well, I mean, personally, I think God is a God of order. He's a God of discipline. So to be loose with anything, I don't think would be the wisest thing. And I think love is also demonstrated within discipline. So if you had to choose between strict discipline and being free-spirited, I'll lean on the side of strict discipline. But,
Okay.
I think there's always a balance in everything. But if I had to choose between the two, then I'll always lean on the side of discipline.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Last one. Partner's career, support or prioritize your own?
A partner's career?
Yeah.
Well, I think God designed marriage where, we had to be a support to each other. When God placed Adam and Eve in the garden, Eve was his helpmeet. So she has a support to what was being done, which was his main industry was that of agriculture. He tended the garden and everything else. So I would say like, support, instead, and it really, the different dynamics that will really impact things. And again, like traditionally speaking, women were actually a huge support for men in their, in their life, work, career, and so forth. However, of course, today we have modern household where, individuals pursue two completely different paths, and everyone, wants to be very progressive in that aspect. So things are sort of flipped around a lot. So then I guess there are different dynamics to that, but I'm more of a, traditional,
Support.
biblical. I think, just following the biblical path. I think support definitely is what God will have us to do.
All right. Good answer. Good answer. Okay. So let's talk about identity.
Okay.
What is identity, first of all, in a future words?
Understood. Well, I mean, I've read the definition before, so based upon the definition, it says that it's the fact of being what a person is, so it's the fact of being who you are.
Right. So according to Oxford Languages, it's the fact of being who or what a person or being or thing is.
Yeah.
So that's basically what you said. So what do you identify as?
So of course, personally, and I know it's a big topic, especially of course identity is general. However, I personally identify gender-wise as a man, as a male.
Okay, so what is that?
What is a male? Well, one who is biologically, of course, if you look at male, there are many different components that make up a male, right? So you may look at it from a chromosome standpoint. You may be XY. You may look at it from a genitalia standpoint.
In one sentence, though, what is a man? If somebody asked you, like if your child asked you, Mom,
what is a male or man?
Dad, what is a man?
Well, a man is different.
What is a male? Okay, what is a male?
Well, yeah, like I was describing. So, like a male would be maybe someone with an XY chromosome, someone who was born with the genitalia of what you may refer to as penis, right? And there are, of course, many different other components that makes up a male, but that's like very strong biological aspects that separate them. Someone who cannot give birth, of course, you may have ladies, of course, unfortunately, may not be able to because of, health reasons, but those are typical definitions or some classifications of a male. But a man, on the other hand, is an adult human male, right?
Okay.
An adult human male, that's what a man is.
So it's a male gender. And talking about genders, according to Wikipedia, did you know there are actually 107 different types of genders?
I didn't know there are so many genders.
107.
And
The
that's
most,
what that apparently that's what they say, but
yeah.
still don't know it.
The 10 most common are cisgender, transgender, non-binary, genderqueer, intersex, gender fluid, agender, and gender non-conforming. So also, according to the Cleveland Clinic, gender identity can be understood to include how people describe, present, and feel about themselves. So you kind of touched on this earlier, but do you think gender entirely separate from biological sex, or is there a significant biological component to what we call gender identity?
Well, I believe, just traditionally speaking, medically speaking, across the past centuries, and not even centuries, but all the way through biblical times, I believe that gender was always also referred to based upon someone's biological assignment. If you think about it for a moment, you go all the way back, all the way back in the Bible. Like people who wrote the Bible knew exactly what a man was and knew what a woman was.
Okay.
There was never confusion in that time. Like literally,
Right.
you'll read the Bible and see, she brought forth a son, and they call his, I mean, all the pronouns and so forth. They didn't have confusion when Christ was born. Christ immediately, they knew that he was a man, a male, because in Matthew 1:21, it says, and when she shall bring forth a son, referring to Mary, calling her a she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. So, even with Christ's case, they didn't have confusion, what is he and so forth. And all the way in the beginning, Adam and Eve, Adam being a man, and which the Bible speaks about,
Male
Eve
and
being
female
a male.
created he them.
Genesis 1:26, male and female created he them. So
Yeah.
we see that, basically what I'm saying is that all throughout the ages, there have never been confusion. I believe, unless maybe the antediluvians, the time before the flood, I believe probably there's a lot of confusion there. But today we're having a replay of that as well. So I definitely, and in medical school, all textbooks pick it up. Someone, the way that they're able to determine if someone is a male is one of the immediate things is by his genitalia, right? Even in ultrasound. So when someone does an ultrasound, you have a gender reveal. Like,
Right.
how do you know what that gender is, right? Of course, biologically speaking, based upon the assignment that that person
Yes,
received
and
at birth.
also
Yeah.
in the most basic of things,
Yeah.
in archaeology and all of these things,
Yeah.
if you found a dead person from at least 50 years ago, you would be able to determine if it is a male or a female,
Yeah.
no matter what the person identified as, because of the biological components
Yeah.
in this person's body, right? So I guess gender identity is a little bit, you can say, you can identify as there's definitely a significant biological component, but there's also the portion about how a person feels to identify themselves as. So we'll get to that part a little bit later.
Yeah.
But right now, especially with this huge controversial question, right? A lot of LGBTQ people are getting hate. Do you think that's something, do you condone that or do you condemn that?
Okay, hate to LGBTQ.
Should we condone or condemn
Yeah.
hate
So-
towards?
Personally, I'm not a person who is for hate in any sense, and I think hatred is actually something that is very evil, and it's not something that brings any unity at all. So, personally, hate towards anyone, any person, I think is wrong, right? So then,
Even if it's an LGBTQ
even if it's
person?
LGBTQ, I believe God desires us to love LGBTQ people. This is what the Bible says. It says, it even says to love your enemies. Like literally, it speaks about how we are to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. So I believe a trans person is my neighbor. Someone who identifies as, any of those 107 genders. We are to love them. However, it doesn't mean that I condone their practices, right? Because even Christ hates sin, but he loves a sinner, and I think that's the balance there, right? And so, like, I see that entire movement. It's definitely something that doesn't agree with even biblical principles, just from that perspective. And even from social perspective in the world who are not even Christian, they're recognizing there's something wrong with that as well. And so again, the practice definitely, and especially I would say when it being enforced upon young kids, children, and so forth, practice definitely is wrong, something I definitely do not condone. But the individuals, I would say, you know, it's my moral obligation to actually love that person.
I'm grateful, and I think I kind of not relate, but I see this kind of situation. I'm grateful that I was able to see it through my parents, actually, not directly with the LGBTQ people, but in relation to myself, actually.
Yeah.
Because I see the way it works in my life, because there's many times where, for example, let's say I used to do a lot of stuff that my parents didn't agree with. And I remember, like, for example, this one time, my parents were against me piercing my ears, and I decided to pierce my ear with a friend in a bathroom of a mall, and I wore a Band-Aid over my ear for like 2 weeks to cover it up. It was very foolish. But the thing is that my mom caught on to it, right? And she was like, what is going on? Show me what's underneath that Band-Aid. Why are you keep wearing a Band-Aid on your ear? So when she took it off, she was very distraught. And so was my dad, because they specifically asked me not to do something, and I went against what they believed in and what they thought was right. But they still loved me, and they talked to me, and their relationship to me didn't care, although they did not agree at all with what I did. So many examples like this in my own life I see with how you're supposed to treat other people, right? Even if you do not agree with something they do, even if you do not believe in what they do and you think what they do is very wrong, there is still love, because every person is a person, and every human being is a human being that deserves a chance and that deserves to be known. And so, yes, so here's a life lesson from Karina's childhood. All right, so do you also think, okay, well, going a little bit off of that, is it appropriate to mandate the use of gender-neutral pronouns, even if you love an LGBTQ person? Should language in general, language usage remain a matter of personal choice, or do you think it's right for us to change up our whole language because they feel a certain way about themselves and they feel that this is what they should be called?
No, definitely. And personally think that someone has their individual right to them calling themselves whatever they want to call themselves. However, I also believe that it's definitely wrong to enforce it on someone else, to be able to demand that this person actually refer to you by a particular pronoun, like they, them, you know, where, you know, you wouldn't even, you know, have a conversation because someone wouldn't refer to you by that particular pronoun. The reason why is because, you know, definitely, if someone really believes, which I believe, that there are only two genders, I believe the only two genders is between a male and a female. That's what the Bible teaches as well, male, female, and you know the gender basically pronoun for that would be a he and a she, you know, and then you know there's no they type of pronoun to refer to as a particular person. I mean, growing up with any one of you, I think if you ever been through English class, you know that they is actually a plurality. This is like multiple people. You know, are you saying that you are multiple people? Like you want me to call you they, them? Like it's so confusing, and I think it becomes to the extent where it becomes even delusional. And for someone to enforce someone else to be able to, you know, change their manner of speaking and what they actually believe because of them, I think that's very selfish. You know, and to be able to do something like that, because if I don't want to be delusional, as you know, which I believe is delusional, I don't want to be that way. Why would you force me to be that way? You know, identity is a fact of being who you are.
I agree. I think I can respect you as a person, but you also have to respect my way of my belief and what I am comfortable with.
No, definitely. And I mean, just like a balance with things, right? Because I also thought, like, man, you know, what if someone like insist, like, hey, call me they, them, else, you know, and I can't speak with you, and let's just say maybe I want to reach that person, maybe I want to share truths with them, and I need to be able to, you know, sort of slowly work my way with them. Like, what do I do? And even that situation, I thought maybe I just wouldn't refer to them as any pronoun. I'm just going to call you by your name. Like if your name is Angela, like, hey, Angela. I'm not going to say they or he or she, if that's a sensitive area for you. But maybe just call you by your name. That might be a way to be able to do it. But definitely not going to call you
Or you can
a
keep your
he
own
if
beliefs
you're a
and
she.
their own beliefs as well.
No, definitely. If you're a woman, and I wouldn't call you a he, I just wouldn't do it, because that would be me participating in something that I think is completely wrong, completely delusional, confusing, and which I also believe is very evil as well, if you put it that way. Yeah.
Yes, I believe there has to be a mutual respect, where it's not only me respecting you, but it's also you respecting me. And I believe we can come at a middle ground, right? Any relationship, you can come at a middle ground where both parties feel respected. So going on to this, right now it's a huge controversy, especially with the laws passed in California. And even in Canada, there's been very many issues with this as well. Do you think children at a young age understand and should be able to, or are able to choose their own identity?
Yeah. I mean, children at a young age, they can't even choose, they don't even know to eat their salad. They can't even choose between what food is right for them and what's not. Just basic stuff like, it's very difficult for them to make any sort of choices. The thing is, if you understand, like, neuroscience, neurology, and how all of that works, you recognize that the frontal lobe of a young individual takes time to develop, right? And that actually develops all the way through someone's teens. The frontal lobe is still actually developing. Imagine for someone at like 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, your frontal lobe is, takes, it's the latest one, is the latest part of the brain in development. So then, in consideration of that, why I mentioned frontal lobe is that this is where you make choices. This is where you make sound judgment, reasoning.
Right.
Your reasoning capabilities are there. So a 6-year-old doesn't know how to reason. He doesn't have judgment, and what they're learning at that age prepares them to make better choices between right and wrong. So now, whatever you feed them with is what they're going to believe for life. Is what they're going to be able to take on. So if you put a lot of filth in their mind, we'll definitely have a generation that don't know anything between right and wrong anymore. And they, where the Bible actually
very
says
dangerous.
that this generation will also begin to call good evil and evil good. And I think that's the area that we're in, because there's so much evil and wickedness that someone is being culturally brought up in, that it becomes almost like a norm. It becomes almost normal. Whereas 100 years ago, that would have been so far-fetched, and that would have been like really crazy idea to even think of. So yeah.
I mean, my nephew wanted to be a dump truck at
Yeah.
6 years old.
Well,
sometimes.
imagine we affirm him and say, well, we have to affirm it into it. So you know what, you are a dump truck. Like you can go out and dump.
And people are going to say that's way too far-fetched and has nothing to do with it. But the reality is that it is, because at that young age, they think they can be anything. And if you feed them ideas, they're going to believe into that, especially if it's somebody they highly trust. So, but should children even be allowed to socially transition? This brings us right on to the next question. Should children be allowed to socially transition, as in change their name, their gender, their pronouns, their presentation before puberty? And if so, how young is too young?
Yeah, no, definitely. So, so then I would say, like, a lot of places right now, like, if I've been looking at like some of the news and articles, different things, and I realized that there are even bills that are being passed right now that is sort of trying to prevent parents from even knowing when their child is actually changing their pronouns.
That's a huge thing.
So
that is a very scary thing.
And I think it's very dangerous, because what we're doing is that when we give so much authority in the hands of children, essentially what we're doing is taking out parental authority and parental rights, right? And where the government is now trying to basically take out authority of parents and saying, hey, I am in charge of those children, right? And that's when it
Right.
becomes very dangerous.
Which is basically what California has been doing up until now.
Yeah, and and then the reason why God actually gave parents is to be able to teach children.
Right.
The government is not, you're not there to be able to teach children what, those details. That is something that they need to learn from home, right? And definitely, certain children, I think it's again the same principle of the frontal lobe not being developed. How can they properly be able to even think of making a transition? And that person is, but the thing too is, right, there are even lots of studies that have been seeing how many children who actually make a transition at a very young age, when they get older, they realize, what, this is not really what they wanted, and then they try to transition. But of course, they have done so much damage already to their bodies. It becomes so depressing for them, and many of them become suicidal. Many other
Right.
issues as well as a result.
And especially since we are a trend jumping generation, right?
Yeah.
So the young mind is very impressionable. And there's so many trends coming out right now and everybody's jumping on them.
Yeah.
Even if they regret it 2 weeks later, they're like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that challenge. Or I don't know what I was thinking looking back on videos. And essentially, even this pronoun and identity and all these things has become a trend where young children see it as a challenge. Like, have you seen, for example, I'm not too much on social media, but the whole filter where, oh, what will I look like a boy? I remember there were certain videos where all the girls would dress themselves up as boys, as guys, to try and see how good they would look as guys. So it's a trend that opens up and that leads to more serious things like this as well. And everybody jumps on it because it seems fun. It seems like something that everybody does, so why can't I do it, right? It seems like, it's a costume. I'm going to put on this costume. I'm going to feel good about myself. And we keep jumping on trends, not realizing that life is not a trend, This is a choice and a decision that is not so easy to take down as a picture or a photo, even if that's hard to take down too, if the whole internet has seen it.
One thing about children is that, even when we were young, right? Even when I was young, there are many times when, let's just say, you may be so excited about a toy, and like 2 weeks time, you have this toy, you play with it, you do everything else, and then 2 weeks pass, and you completely forget about it, don't even want to use it anymore, right? And, and probably even so many phases. I've been through so many phases where I've liked doing certain things. I tried out certain things and just thought maybe it's interesting. Let me test this out. But then, those things didn't have like a really lasting impact per se upon even my physical frame. But to be able to do something extreme as completely castrating someone, like literally changing the entire genitalia, like, beginning to even pump someone with hormones, and on all of those other transitionary processes that they go through, like that is something that people that affects someone for life. And what a lot of people will say in those communities is that, oh, it's they can easily detransition someone, they go back to a normal standing.
It's not reversible.
But it's not anything like that. So I think definitely someone who is still developing at a young age, haven't been able to, and still under the parental supervision, I think we should, refer more to the parents. Like why surpass or usurp authority of a parent and go directly to a kid who is still trying to figure out life. Allow the parents to be able to make decisions for their younger ones, but at the same time still, having regulations where, of course, someone who is biologically still young and unable to even go through that, that could sort of be safeguarded, to prevent issues.
I like that you mentioned about phases, that we go through phases, especially as children growing up. Everybody goes through phases to try and understand who we are, right? To try and find ourselves. And I was a tomboy for years. I was a tomboy, and then I transitioned into being an emo girl. And I'm very grateful I didn't do anything that would have been so lifelong lasting, to make me constantly remaining an emo girl, because I grew out of that phase. That was a phase I had first as a tomboy. I had some other phases too, but those were my two main ones, right? And then afterwards as an emo girl, and then now I totally grew out of it, because we grow out of it. We go through life, things change, our mindset changes. our situation changes, so things become different. And we also mentioned before that gender identity is how a person prevents or feels about themselves, right? So considering that we live in a world where selfishness is just being taught as a standard, and right now is at its peak, where everything is basically about me, how I feel, what I want, what I need. Everything is about me, myself, and I nowadays, right? Do you think that we can truly rely on our feelings this much? Or is that something that's going to bring us to dangerous grounds?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think society today wants us to depend upon feeling. Because if we cannot make a decision based upon proper reasoning, then, they basically could control you. I mean, it's very easy to change feelings. Like, the music we listen to could change our feelings. I mean, movies we watch change our feelings. I mean, the weather, climate, all those things impacts our feelings, right?
And we can see how it's due, because even as a child, I remember, right, we would watch some Jackie Chan movie, and we would feel like we were the next Jackie Chan. We felt like we could do all of these things, and that we were just some superhero. Even watching any superhero movies, right, growing up, you thought you were a hero. So obviously them making you feel a certain way works.
Yeah, and with feelings, it becomes very dangerous when we just depend upon our feelings and not go based upon also something that is factual, right? Because the Bible also says that the heart of man is desperately wicked. Who could know it? And if we just depend upon our hearts, so in other words, our minds, how we feel, and so forth, the Bible says it's very wicked. Like, that's why we, if we just say, oh, I feel this way, like, I can literally feel like a murderer right now. Does that mean that I go out and murder people?
No, you shouldn't act upon it.
So then why? Because it is something that is wrong. It's morally wrong. It's
called an intrusive thought.
Yeah. So then, essentially, if I just go upon everything I feel like or what I feel like, I'll be a very confused, unhappy human being. I need something more factual that I make decisions based upon. And what is factual? Like, if you want to understand what is factual, of course, from a Christian perspective, I believe the Bible is a source of factual information. And the Bible says in John 17 verse 17 that sanctify them through thy truth, thy word is truth. So it's something that we can depend upon, something that we can be able to could be able to know, what, this is actually a reliable source of truth. We live in an age where truth is almost it's almost very extremely hard to be seen or to be heard. There's lots of I'm sure you've heard the term fake news, right? Especially popularized by a lot of recent politicians and so forth. But then definitely there's lots of lies on the media all over the place. But we need to have a source, a foundation of truth.
Yes, right. And I bet 95% of people don't feel like going to work when they wake up, right? But you should do it because you need to provide for yourself and for your family.
Yeah.
So going based upon your feelings is not always the best thing to do. You need to follow you need to follow what's right and what's good for you. Because if you stop going to work, your life is just going to fall into you're not going to have a purpose, you're not going to have a drive, you're not going to have an income. You're going to become depressed. Your whole life is just going to become ruined, right? So not because you feel upon something, you should act upon it, right? So yeah, all right. Well, that's a wrap for today. My question for y'all is, should we rely so much on feelings? Do you think so? Or why not? Please leave a comment down below and do like, subscribe, or follow. All right, till next time, toodles.